this idea of Nicholas, I've actually contacted two people who have experience in the oil industry and in this kind of work, asking for its feasibility. And both of them have come very positively that this is very important and this is very possible. One of them is Dr. Ghazi Sabr Al-Ali, General Director of the Northern Oil Company, who told me that he was in charge of such work as spraying of the black crude oil on surfaces, and it was very widely used methods to settle down dust. And I think this is quite an important issue. The other person is Hassan Jum'a, who is the Secretary of the Oil Union's worker, who actually also confirms these things. And I'd like to mention these two people and what they told me, because actually this seems to be quite a feasible and simple solution in the short term. It doesn't resolve the issue, but it reduces the dust, which carries but there must be something we can do to help this forward. Nicholas' point was actually based on a study by the United Nations Environmental Programme, which was published in March 2003, which found depleted uranium in air and groundwater in Bosnia 7 years after the weapons were fired. It recommended collecting DU fragments, covering contaminated point with asphalt or clean soil, keeping records of contaminated sites. I think we should actually still hold on to this United Nations environmental study. We do want to cover these sites, and it's possible in Iraq to be probably covered in something like black oil. The mention of asphalt gives credence to what Nicholas would suggest here. Iraq, of course, is drier and more prone to dust storms than in Bosnia, apart from the fact that the amount of depleted uranium used is 200 times greater, 2,000 tons compared with about 7 to 10 tons. The reference to the United Nations Environment Programme is a BBC report on their website, 24th of April 2003. In Iraq, in peacetime, oil is normally spread by tankers traveling on dirt trucks, moving at a slow pace, say about 5 miles an hour, on rural, non-tarmacked roads. At the back of the tankers are low-lying cross pipe with holes in. And it's very simple as that. It's a tanker with a pipe in the back. I have witnessed this often all my childhood in Iraq. Most of the Iraqis around here will probably testify to this. This was very effective. Hassan Jum'a says that this is continuously being done still in Basra region in Romania. Dr. Ghazi Sabr Ali, the director, mentioned that he was in charge of that, and that the dirt road along the oil pipelines and between the main pumping stations between Kirkuk and K3, which is about 200 miles, was done in this way. At every now and then, I don't remember how many kilometers between, I think it's about every 15 kilometers, there's a faucet in the pipe with a counter from which the tankers fill in the oil and they use them. So the system of throwing or spraying the oil on roads, on desert areas, is there. It's quite simple. I think when I talked about it with other people, it seems to be the Iraqis are actually in a kind of numb situation. There's a kind of a paralysis coming from that the main priorities are for daily survival. Survive from day to day. They cannot actually plan or think about anything particular. Especially they cannot think and plan for health. They are surviving day on day. That's why it's quite important for Iraqis abroad and for their friends to find ways of initiating things like that. There seems to be very little difficulty in spraying of oil. Safety consideration will need to be taken into account, so hoses can be wheeled from few meters while the holes are nearer to the ground. The relative risk of inhaling the fumes and fire are to be compared with radiation risks, and simple engineering solutions could be devised through trials. There is scope for solutions for the need to spray at a distance, although wearing protective clothing and simple face masks is probably enough. It seems accepted by Iraqis that their government did not publicize the risk for depleted uranium contamination to avoid public panic. And I think this happened during Saddam's time and even in this time. Research has carried out but in the background. That silence coincided with the silence of the United States and the United Kingdom military for similar reasons and because of the cost involved. This includes all of the Western powers to the extent that some depleted uranium stocks are said to be still exposed in the US itself. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Because they want to deny that depleted uranium causes cancer, they actually don't do anything to protect their own citizens. They don't accept even responsibility for their own veterans. Calling for experiments in such simple solutions seems to be one of the first things we can do in various ways. These may be carried out by Iraqi government, the Iraqi governorates, councils like the Basra Governorate, and even by local organizations. I think the issue is like this. The occupation forces are refusing to acknowledge the obvious problem. So our response has to be to keep the issue alive. The main thing is to keep the issue alive and wait for appropriate points in the change of governments, and probably some political situations will arise for the environment issue to come up. The Iraqi government is lacking any effect, although there seem to be some inroads, as shown by the article by Khalil Muqdadi. There is an article on 4 pages, and it's on a website. It is put outside, and you can have some copies from me if you like. But one thing I would like to mention about the Iraqi government, the example of the oil law and the effect some people in the environment who actually signed petition and talked and actually pressurized the Iraqi government was very successful. It was successful in holding the Iraqi law for so far for 15, 18 months. So I think the Iraqi government is malleable. It's possible for people, especially people who are not necessarily activists or somebody who is out of the way for them, to be effective. And I think the professionals in the UK, Iraqi professionals in the UK, can actually have an effect by writing directly to the Iraqi parliament and the Iraqi government. And I think what happens in this article, Dr. Carbon mentions an official document by Shahristani, by the Minister of Oil, which actually acknowledge or partly acknowledge the need for a study of the effect of radiation. So there is a beginning. This has been ignored, of course, has been ignored by the people on the ground. What Hassan Juma is telling us is that the area contaminated is roughly demarcated. There is a map of about 20 square kilometers in South Rumeira field, where people know what to avoid. But he actually himself mentioned that there was 21 cases of leukemia. This is mentioned in Birmingham. 21 cases of leukemia, that he himself approached Maliki, the Prime Minister of Iraq, about this, and the Maliki has asked for details and promised that they would be treated at the expense of the government. Nothing has happened, of course, since then. But these things can be pressed on the Iraqi government. If the Americans cannot do it, the Iraqi government should be able to do it. If the Iraqi government cannot do it, then the Basra governorates, who are responsible for the people of Basra, have to do something of it. And if they don't do it, then some, even civil society organizations, like the unions, the electricity workers union, the oil unions, could start something. They need some counters, they need a bit, but it doesn't require a great deal. We have a lot of oil in Iraq, and the black oil, which was used to be, in most cases, were actually the remnant of the processed oil from the refineries. And some people who are in the know are noting, they know this. So it doesn't, it's not going to be a solution, like Nicholas was saying. It's not a solution, it's some alleviation of the problem. But in order for us mentally to survive, we have to start doing something. Some of it is a political pressure, but some of it is also some kind of advice, some kind of help, initiating something inside the country.
Thank you.